Good evening. We're trying to decide whether this could be a PTO area council meeting or maybe a board meeting. I would like to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I would like to say I put a lot of thought into choosing tonight's date for this presentation. We really didn't. We looked at the calendar and we found out what date was available. But the reality is that it's apropos that this is the evening that we're going to be talking about school safety and security. 17 years ago today was the Columbine shooting. And actually, I was in my first semester as a principal. So you can only imagine what kind of emotions you go through at that time. And 17 years later, we're still dealing with a number of things, but we have a lot more knowledge. So having said that, I really want to thank you all for being here this evening. In particular, I want you all to understand what a real pleasure it is for the school district to be working with outstanding police departments in Berkeley Heights and Mountainside, and also the prosecutor's office. Whenever we need assistance, we just ask and we get it. And that's something that is immeasurable, and we really truly appreciate all of your help and guidance. And you have to understand that we all are working together to make sure that the students are in the safest environment that they can be. So sometimes people don't always understand when they can't have information why we're not providing it. And in many cases, we're always measuring the things that we share in order to make sure that we're providing that safest environment. In particular, this evening, I'd like to thank Mr. Mark Cantagallo. Mark is the assistant principal here at Governor Livingston High School. He also is the chairperson of our crisis response team. So Mark does a lot of training, and he interacts with a number of organizations, again, in order to make sure that we're prepared for anything. And he's actually going to start the program with providing an overview of some of the school programs that are in existence and share some information. After his initial presentation, we're going to have a panel who Mark will introduce, and the panel will respond to some pre-made questions in order to provide information to you. And then after the panel presentation, we'll open up to any questions that anybody might have. So again, I thank you for joining us, and I'd like to turn the program over to Mark.
Thank you. As Ms. Ratner said, we're going to be going over a wealth of specific details on school safety and security, specifically in the Berkeley Heights School District and in conjunction with the Ascending District Mountainside. In order to hone in on our task tonight, I want to go through a few objectives. The first being, we want to make sure that everybody understands where our best practices come from for prevention, drill procedures, and crisis response. The second one, you'll also learn about some of the terminology of the crisis management situations. Our third objective will be to make sure that if you see something or hear something, where do you go to distribute that information, and what do you do? Finally, we will finish up the presentation with less talking from me and more talking from the experts, from our local and county officials and school board members. As I stated, we're going to start with where our best practices come from. Roughly 6 years ago, there was a school security law enacted by New Jersey that required a couple different things. The first is to make sure that all school personnel members are trained in school safety and security procedures. As Mrs. Ratner explained, I am the chairperson of the Crisis Planning Committee and Crisis Response Committee, which is a group that is made up of many of the people that you see in the room, principals, assistant principals, the nurse, as well as school psychologists. We also have a transportation expert on our panel, and we discuss many of the best practices in each individual school, specific situations, and how to constantly improve upon our school district and our drills. This law requires us to conduct drills every single month, one fire drill and one school security drill. There are specific security drills that must be completed each year, some of which are lockdown drills, non-fire evacuation drills, and bomb threat evacuation drills. And again, as I said, the Crisis Planning Committee works to make sure all of these drills are done accordingly. We got all of the information to put our best practices together from these various resources. There's Homeland Security resources, New Jersey School Boards, task force resource, county officials, local police departments, fire departments, and other best practice professional developments. Not just myself, but many of the administrators that are in the room tonight have gone, and the police officers have gone to these professional developments to continue to broaden their horizons and make sure that our schools are as safe as possible. One of the important things about our best practices is that we have a crisis manual. It is a few hundred pages long that every single year is reviewed page by page by our committee, by individuals, to make sure that every single detail is covered. This is important because this manual is comprised of building level plans as well as district level plans and goes from a variety of different situations, from an issue in a hallway to massive weather disasters. So we try to cover as much information as we can and specify exactly what we want to do in all of these situations. As mentioned on the previous slide, the New Jersey School Board's task force made a series of recommendations in 7 specific areas with summarizing it in well over 20 different areas. Now, last year, myself, the Crisis Planning Committee, and other administrators put together a board presentation in March, specifically March 12th, 2015, to discuss some of their recommendations and how our school district matched up with the recommendations. And everybody in the room will be happy to know that we not only met their expectations, but far exceeded and have been innovative in some of the things that we are doing. The most important recommendation that was given by the school officials and police departments was to make sure that you target harden your physical spaces. And up on the PowerPoint right now are some examples of how schools in New Jersey and us at Berkeley Heights are continuing to make sure that our physical spaces are secure. The next most important thing was to work collaboratively with local police departments and have a school resource officer employed. And we are lucky that both at Governor Livingston with a shared school system and Mountainside has an SRO, and the District of Berkeley Heights also has a school resource officer. And we are lucky to have 2 of the finest school resource officers, which I'll introduce you to later, Officer Ed Gaffney and Detective Sean Bendick. Our next objective is to review some of the terminology that you may hear on the news or possibly read about in articles. It's important to go over this terminology, because when you see something on the news, you might want to understand how it relates to our district, or maybe the superintendent put a letter explaining and using some of the terminology. So it's important that we're all on the same page and understand what is going on. The first comparison that I would like to make is the difference between a lockdown and a shelter in place. A lockdown situation occurs, either a drill or in practice, when a school administrator, staff member, student is in immediate danger. Now, that danger could come from a variation of different places. A student, an adult, a fugitive that's around the building, not necessarily in the building, somebody that has a weapon in the building. That practice is important because if we go to a lockdown situation, all the doors get locked, the lights get turned out, and everybody is out of sight, okay? And everybody should remain quiet at that time. There is a stark difference between a lockdown and a shelter in place. And I want to make sure that we eliminate the confusion between the two. A shelter-in-place situation could occur, and I'll give you just some of the many examples, where maybe a student or staff member is injured in the hallway, and you don't want the bell to ring and have lots of other people move through the hallway. causing emergency responders not to be able to assist that person. In my own personal experience in a different district, thankfully to say, I get a phone call over the radio, or not a phone call over the radio, but over the radio I get a call. The water is flowing down the hallway like the Nile River. And I run down the hallway and proceed to slip like a slip and slide in over a foot of water because one of the flushometers snapped on one of the toilets. So clearly I do not want to go into a lockdown. I want to go to a shelter in place to make sure nobody else does what I did and slips like a slip and slide down the hallway. So it's important to understand in this situation the difference between lockdown, shelter in place. Shelter in place, students are continuing to learn. Maybe there's an investigation going on that we don't need it to be disrupted as well. The lights are on and most of the normal practices are occurring. But we don't want anybody to leave the building, enter the building, leave the classroom, enter the classroom. We want to make sure everybody's safe and is available to help if need be. The next group I want to talk about is the difference between fire evacuation and a bomb threat evacuation or non-fire evacuation. And I use bomb threat as an example because there are other examples that I will use in a non-fire evacuation. In a fire evacuation, as all of us in the audience have grown up, it used to be 2 drills a month. You hear the bell, you go outside, 3 minutes later, you take attendance, you walk back in, you were 100 feet away from the building, you shut the doors, you shut the windows to make sure that the fire can't get oxygen, and you move on. And interestingly enough, one of the more famous statistics that I hear when I go to all of these trainings is the first question they ask is, how many people in the state of New Jersey have perished due to a fire in the past 50 years in a school, a public school, not a secondary school? And the answer is 0. And then they talk about how important it is to practice non-fire evacuations versus fire evacuations. We certainly take fire evacuations as seriously as any other drill, but we've become excellent at it. Now to transition to non-fire evacuation, specifically bomb threat situation. As you leave the room, you want to make sure if the doors are open, they stay open. If the windows are open, they stay open. Again, if it happens to do with a bomb, you don't want to have blast. The radius will become much smaller if everything is open. If you've ever seen the movie Armageddon, the gentleman talks about the bomb that they want to destroy the asteroid with. He says it's like a firecracker open in your hand. If you're open, you're probably getting a scratch. You close, your hand might come off. Similar to bomb threat evacuation. Keep everything open, blast radius much smaller than not. In this situation, we may have to call for a reunification or possible relocation to another building even, or somewhere to 500 to 1,000 feet away. In those situations that require a reunification, it is absolutely imperative that everyone in the community understands the school officials, the police departments, the fire departments will work together to comprise a very clear set of instructions to parents and guardians. Because in these situations, if everyone continues to rush towards the school, we'll have what happened this morning on Mountain Avenue, accident, traffic, problems. Okay, now emergency responders can't get to the location and assist. So it's extremely important that you continue to trust the emergency responders, continue to trust the school, and if you are asked not to come to the school, it's for the purpose of keeping everybody safe in the school and around the school. Because we may have to transport students, we may have to transport people that may not be in the best shape medically. Next, I'm going to transition over to if you hear something or see something, make sure that you say something. A very popular phrase coming from the unfortunate events of 9/11. As I used the word earlier about with imperative, I want to use that word again because it's appropriate in this instance. If there is ever a time where students, staff, community members have any questions or concerns about student safety, they can reach out to any number of individuals that are listed. It could be a school staff member, it could be a counselor, it could be a child study team member, it could be a custodian, it could be a police officer, a fire department official. The increased involvement of the community and the community's togetherness to discuss and make us aware of situations is what makes the communities of both Mountainside and Berkeley Heights great. In order to foster some of this, we have done various programs. Our SROs have gone into the classroom and taught different programs. This slide focuses on the harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Again, I started to talk about fostering this sense of community and mentioned that our SRO officers teach lessons. We also have invited various motivational speakers, such as Marlon Smith this year, that was sponsored, thankfully, by the PTO and the Berkeley Heights Education Foundation, in which they build a sense of community, a sense of unity, and upstanders is what they're described as, in not only the staff, but the students. There was a Celebrating Calm event that occurred this year as well, encouraging parents and students on problem solving. And again, if there's a problem and you hear something or see something, say something. When it relates to an HIB situation, we obviously have zero tolerance for that. We have a very detailed policy, and it's important to note that we will investigate things that rise to this level. So it's very important that you communicate with us very specific details and any information that you might have, because as we continue, we foster a positive climate, a positive school climate. And if we continue to increase our communication, we can only improve upon those things. Just these past 6 weeks, actually, we're in the 5th of 6 weeks of an event at Governor Livingston High School, which we are focusing on 6 pillars of good character. We've asked students to select songs that relate to some of the 6 characteristics. This is one of the many ways that our students are helping us build a stronger community. We have many activities from the elementary levels, middle school levels, and high school levels that assist in fostering community service and positive school climates. At this point, you're probably wondering, well, that's great, but how do I know about this information? You mentioned to me earlier that I can gather some of this information from school officials, but where do I go if there's a problem, or how do I get contact information? All of the information can be found on our district website. When there is communication, we do it through multiple avenues, whether it be email, the Honeywell system through phone. The Honeywell system can be specific to your family, different guardians, different phone numbers, different sets of alerts. You can also use school wires. You can sign up for our Twitter account, and we're always looking to raise our Twitter account numbers, so please check that out on our website. It's important, though, because it's another avenue that maybe you don't check your email, maybe you don't have email alerts, but your Twitter's on for some reason, okay? This is just another way that the district likes to reach out to everybody and make sure that we're all in the same loop. As I said earlier, we continue to improve upon our district's policies through many different avenues. And some of those avenues are through some of the people that I'm going to call up to the dais here and ask them specific questions about other parts of this presentation that I have not necessarily detailed or gotten into yet. I've left it for them. At this time, I would like to introduce our members of the panel. First, I would like to point out that we not only have Mrs. Ratner, superintendent, but she's also superintendent of the year. Don't be afraid to applause for that. It will get on camera. Next, I'm going to call up our Berkeley Heights Police Chief, Chief John D. Pasquale. I'm going to call up our Mountainside Police Chief, Chief Alan Atanasio. Our Berkeley Heights Resource Officer, Officer Ed Gaffney. Our Mountainside School Resource Officer, Detective Sean Bendick. Our first of two representatives from the Union County Prosecutor's Office, Detective Vito Coliciti. And also from the Union County Prosecutor's Office, Detective Nick Veltri. And not to leave him for last, he's the tallest member of our panel and also has the longest title and prefix to his name, Union County SWAT Team member, Berkeley Heights Police Officer, Administrative Sergeant Ernest Schmidt. So first I'm going to start with you, Mrs. Ratner. Little change of roles here where I get to ask you questions. Could you tell everyone a little about the memorandum of agreement between the Berkeley Heights Board of Education and the Berkeley Heights Police Department?
Sure. The memorandum of agreement was actually established in 1988. That's hard to believe, but that's when the program actually was initiated. And it is an agreement that's signed between law enforcement and education officials. And it really focuses on the goal of ensuring a safe educational environment for all of our staff and students. We hold an annual meeting with the county prosecutor, the executive county superintendent of schools, the chief of police of both Mountainside and Berkeley Heights, as well as myself being at that meeting. And every year we go through the memorandum of agreement. We particularly focus on any changes that might occur. And typically major changes occur every 4 years in the document itself. The document is a 70-page document that really tries to guide us through any kinds of issues that we might encounter, and it really provides us, meaning the law officials and the school officials, with guidelines in dealing with many types of things, drug and alcohol abuse, information regarding investigations, concerns regarding threats. Most recently, there have been a significant number of changes to the law based upon some laws that were put in place, such as the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, as well as, so that focuses mostly on any issues of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. We also have a variety of things that might fall under our purview that may not have fallen under it before. Things involving sexting and what that would entail in terms of either law enforcement discovering that or school officials discovering it, and what that might how that might impact a student and their record. There's also a number of ways of looking at how we could consequence a student in terms of things. We all students are youngsters, they're young children, and sometimes they don't always make the best choices. So there are opportunities for us to look at other ways for them to hopefully see what they've done wrong and hopefully never make that same mistake again. The other thing that's always evolving are the drugs and alcohol that's available to students. And now we have to deal not only with prescription drugs or regular drugs, we're now dealing with synthetic drugs. Bath salts, things like that. So the memorandum of agreement will specifically address that. And of course, one of the things that technology is great, but it has also added another layer of instances where not just students or people can be bullied face-to-face, they can be cyberbullied, or there's other issues that might occur overall. So, you know, we really use this as our guideline in dealing with situations. And remember that our goal is to make sure our students are always safe. So we are sharing information with both police departments and vice versa. They're sharing information with us so that we can make sure that we can investigate things, we can check things out, and we know that the more information we have, the better we are to make discover ways that we can help or assist. So that is kind of an overview of the memorandum of agreement.
Thank you. Chief DePasquale, two questions here for you. I'm going to combine them in a sense. How has the Berkeley Heights Police Department increased visibility during school hours? Along with, how is the department working with the schools to make sure that the drop-off and pickup times are safer for students, parents, and staff?
Okay, so I'm proud to say, as long as I can remember, the Berkeley Heights Police Department has been involved in the schools, has taken an active role in participating in school activities. I can remember when I was actually going to school 35 years ago, police officers being in and around the schools, including some of the programs that they were involved in, like the bike rodeo, which we still are today. Obviously, based on needs for our students, for our staff, and for our schools, we've increased our footprint, so to speak, in the schools. In the 90s, we started the DARE program, which I believe everybody's familiar with, and that's something that we took pride in. It's a drug awareness program that, for obvious reasons, is important. It brought our police officers, a designated police officer, into our 5th grade classes, and a few other programs in addition to that, but it was exclusively really interactive with the younger kids in 1 grade level and 1 police officer. That later progressed into our full-time school resource officer. As many of you know, Detective Sloan did that for years and did a great job. He was a great asset to the department, and I think the schools. He helped to solidify our relationship and make it truly productive. And so the SRO actually started out as somewhat of a part-time, but became a full-time, which we have now. We have a full-time SRO, as was discussed. We also have a juvenile detective that handles other juvenile matters in addition to that. So in some respects, we have 2 officers designated for that age group of students. Currently, we've taken extra measures to not only have just our school resource officer and our juvenile detective and also Mountainside's involved with the schools, but we're trying to find ways to get all of our officers in and around the schools to interact not only with our students, but the faculty and the staff and other personnel within the schools, because we think, obviously, building a rapport with both the students and the staff is important for all of our officers. So what we've done is, and I thank Sergeant Smithford, he helped develop the program or the process. We've found ways to have all of our officers get involved in the schools, get into the schools, walk through schools, get to know the students and staff. So you may have noticed in the last year, certainly recently, more officers in and around the school. It's important for us. We think it's really our jumping off point as far as our law enforcement purpose in the community. So that's it for that.
Thank you.
You want your second question for the drop-offs?
The drop-off,
Okay.
yes.
Again, that's a little history on it. I think we were involved in that, establishing some of the drop-off plans and maps long before I was a police officer. I know recently we've done some work at Columbia School and other schools. I think Mr. Geiger every year puts out a letter to the new students or the parents of new students at Columbia School on the website, and a map that was provided by the police department, which basically lays out the traffic flow as it relates to drop-off and pickup of school. So we've always been involved in that in terms of planning it out, and they're pretty well established, but inevitably there's issues that pop up that will go out on a case-by-case basis and address either our traffic officer or sometimes our school resource officer will assist in drop-offs, pickups, and like I said, as they relate to any complaints that might come in. We also get involved with the transportation. They'll call us if there's a new bus stop or a bus stop that might be of concern, and we'll also go out there and look at that and make sure it's a safe or try to provide or suggest another safe alternative to certain bus stops.
Thank you. And also myself and Business Administrator Mrs. Felizzola have a meeting with the head of traffic in Berkeley Heights coming up tomorrow, actually,
yes,
to discuss some of these things as well. So it's a good timing for our presentation here. Chief Atanasio, earlier I mentioned how important New Jersey school boards thought an SRO officer was, but from your perspective, how important is it is the role of an SRO to a school district, and what are some of the responsibilities?
Well, an SRO has a diverse role in the school community. He has many duties and responsibilities. We've defined 3 of the duties and responsibilities as that of a law enforcement officer first, a law-related counselor, and a law-related educator. As a law enforcement officer, the school and its grounds become that officer's patrol beat. His job is to provide for a safe environment in and around the schools. As a law counselor, the SRO provides information to both students and parents on drug or alcohol issues, traffic laws that the new drivers may have questions about, and about making good choices, as you stated earlier. As a law-related educator, the SRO is available to any of the school staff to sit in as a guest speaker. As Chief DePasquale stated, we have also moved the DARE program into the high school. And the Mountainside Police Department recognized early on that our SRO started with a relationship with the children in the elementary school and the middle school. But without having that officer here at the high school, they had to get a new relationship with the new SRO up here. So Mountainside recognized that and added to the assignments of the officer, the high school up here at GL. And that way, the officer who has built relationships with these children can continue them on.
Thank you very much. Officer Gaffney, as one of the SRO officers for the Berkeley Heights Public Schools, you get to go into the classroom and teach our students. Could you discuss some of these topics that you cover in these lessons?
Sure. We started a program, it's called LEADS. We no longer teach DARE in Berkeley Heights. It's called LEADS, it's Law Enforcement Against Drugs. And with LEADS, we teach Too Good for Drugs. It's from the Mendez Foundation. And we teach goal setting, communication, be verbal and nonverbal communication, decision making. These kids are fast to make decisions. We're trying to teach them to, when they make a decision, stop, think, and then act. Emotions and how their emotions can get them in trouble, control their emotions and consequences of not controlling them. The different styles of communications, whether it's assertive or passive. We go over bonding and relationships, because everyone has, in the 5th grade, which we started, one of the major issues we have is that children all want to have the best friend. We say, you know, what makes a good friend and what makes a healthy relationship with them. We also go over managing their mistakes, because they all get very negative. Everyone here as kids, if they make a mistake, they get very negative, and that's a snowball. So we're trying to teach them to be positive and use their mistakes as a learning experience. We go over peer pressure refusal and explore different strategies to handle the peer pressure. And then we also cover the dangers of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana.
Thank you very much. Detective Bendick, as an SRO, how important is your interaction with the students as they transition from middle school to Governor Livingston High School?
My interactions with the children are extremely important. Historically, the Mountainside Police have done a phenomenal job at establishing and maintaining a positive rapport with the youth of our community from as early as preschool age. During that time, the students are taught that the Mountainside School Resource Officer will see them through their undergraduate scholastic careers. As most of us can appreciate, when the kids reach high school age and during those transition years, they're often faced with some precarious and uncertain scenarios. And that's when they really turn to the familiar face in an otherwise unfamiliar time in their lives for guidance and advice to see them through those situations.
Thank you. Moving over to our Union County representatives, Detective Colicity, could you tell us why police departments and school officials are not allowed to release certain information during and after crisis situations?
Well, the answer to that is just to protect the integrity of the investigation in order to allow the investigators to take the necessary statements and gather all the information they can before it's released to the public in general.
I appreciate that. And again, as we communicate through different situations, as much information as we're able to give, we will, but again, we need to make sure, as the detective stated, that we're working within our boundaries as well. Detective Veltri, you have the longest questions of the night. I'm going to give you the first one at this time. What are some key points that you would like parents and school officials to know about internet safety?
In addition to what the superintendent said, other than having the normal traditional issues that the schools deal with, we now have cyberbullying, cyber harassment, sexting, all these new issues that go along with this technology era that we're kind of molding ourselves into. The most important thing, I do a parent presentation. I've actually done one here and you know, multiple presentations through the Berkeley Heights school system. The most important slide on that presentation, I would say, is to stay in the loop. It's just the way it is. Some parents know more about technology than others, and talk to your kids about the newest applications, what kids are using, kind of just stay in the loop with parents, with other students, as well as the local agencies. Stay in the loop on what's new, because something that was, you know, popular a week before may not even be popular or relevant anymore. So stay in the loop, like I said, and that's probably the best way to educate yourselves on this new technology era that we're dealing with.
So furthermore, related to technology, as you may or may not know, Berkeley Heights has expanded the use of technology with a one-to-one initiative extensively at the middle school and the high school. Could you explain a little bit about the correlation between a school-issued iPad and a student's locker?
Pretty much the same policy applies for lockers. It's school property. The iPads are great. The laptops are great. You know, it's a good initiative. Kids have to understand that even though these are theirs to use, they're the schools and they're owned by the district. So the same policy applies to lockers as iPads. Even at home, you know, you're searching the web at home, playing games. A lot of these kids know how to crack the security filters and kind of do their own thing on these applications and on these iPads. They have to understand that the same rules apply. The school has full reign over your iPad, your locker. When you're there, it's you know, school property, public property. So that's probably the best way to get it through to them, so that they know, you know, the school can, you know, go through the iPad if they want to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Administrative Sergeant Schmidt, can you explain what steps the Berkeley Heights Police Department has taken to become familiar with the school layouts, security cameras, school safety and security drills?
Sure. A lot of it came from active shooter response training that swept through law enforcement post-Columbine, and the benefits that the participants found when they knew layouts of schools and new entrances and new approach routes and things like that. And as our SWAT team started teaching around the county and around New Jersey active shooter response about 10 years ago, we started teaching and pushing out to law enforcement around the state. They should also become familiar with the districts, the actual buildings, even the internal layouts, cameras, et cetera. So it was natural to bring that back to our patrol units and all our personnel. And we use our active shooter training as our primary way of getting familiar with all the layouts of our schools. So our officers, if they do have to respond to a critical incident, it doesn't feel like it's the first time they've been in a building and they need a map. So every year, biennial, every 2 years, we do active shooter response training, and at this point, we've done it in every school in the district. We just completed Mountain Park last month, and that was the last school that every officer in our town has gone through physically. Those days are extensive. They're 8-hour days on Saturday, and we cover everything, every room where the major points are inside, the cafeterias, the gyms, the main offices. We touch on cameras there. What the access points are for the cameras, should we need to access the cameras. And we make sure every officer is familiar and test them as such at the end of the day. That includes approaches to the building, evacuation points, and things like that. Other than that, the chiefs instituted a daily patrol and walk-through policy. as he alluded to before, and we think that's going to be a good step, too, in making officers familiar in an emergency. A lot of scenarios we run, if the school resource officer was in our scenario, he was a great resource in terms of the responding officers. The school resource officer, if he heard, oh, room 135, computer lab, he said, oh, I know where that is, follow me. And that familiarity we saw in our school resource officers, we decided to push out through every officer in our department because it was so valuable in an emergency. So we use that training as our primary method of getting people familiar. The walkthroughs and patrols, where we assist the principals and the district in checking their security. An extra layer, a new fresh set of eyes also provides familiarity to our officers with our school layouts. The cameras work hand in hand with that. We document camera locations during our school security surveys, where we physically sat down with each principal, head custodian, walked the grounds, gave some suggestions on security improvements. We brought that information back and documented it, and we're making that available to all our officers upon response from their cars, so they can access things like that. Where is this? Where is this office? Where is a key? Where is a camera system? Things like that. The security drills, that's another big part of our familiarity. And the school principals will notify our police department before they run drills. That's the way we get it done best. And whoever's working the road, coverage providing, pretty much almost near 100% response. We're very close to always assisting them with drills. We'll have officers respond to the schools, especially our newer officers. We'll meet with the principal. They'll call the drill, whether it be a lockdown, what have you. And our officers will physically take a key, go through the schools, open the doors, check to see that the children are secreting themselves well, and the rooms are dark, and the procedure is followed. And again, it's just a fresh set of eyes. And from that, our officers get to see some children, talk to them, make suggestions, and more familiarity with the internal school layouts, which is enormous during an emergency.
Thank you for that. And I again want to make sure that if I did not point out earlier when talking about crisis management and best practices, that a few years ago the state of New Jersey has random checkups, and they came to the Berkeley Heights School District, reviewed page by page our manual and our procedures with the police department and our school officials, and were thoroughly impressed with what we do, and used our school's documentation as a model and procedures to the rest of the state as well. So it's a credit to the collaboration with all of the police departments, county, local, and our school district. Up at the screen now, as we start to wrap up the presentation portion before we get into the question and hopefully answer portion of the presentation, there are a series of websites and resources that you have up there where I developed the presentation along with other administrators and the police department. So if you have time, we are going to end up posting this on the district website. So please visit some of these places. There's a lot of detail, hundreds and hundreds of pages of things to better understand where our practices come from and how and why we're keeping everybody safe at the Berkeley Heights School District. So I want to make sure that I thank everybody on the panel before moving to the question and answer period once again. We took a lot of time and met to put this presentation together, and I did truly appreciate it. So thank you to all of you. As we transition to the question and answer portion, I want to also point out the other administrators, principals, assistant superintendent, assistant principals that are here. They're all smirking at me right now because they don't want to be asked questions. But they are also available. If you have a building-specific question, they might be able to answer. So I want to make sure that it's pointed out that they put just as much time as anybody else on our panel here into making sure everybody is safe and secure at their schools. A couple ground rules here. As you know, school safety and security is a very specific and sensitive topic. Therefore, if any of the questions cross over where we may not be able to answer due to specific information, please understand that it's for the safety of all of the students and staff involved. If there are, for whatever reason, a question that we cannot answer because we don't know or simply did not do the research on, we will do the research and get back to you as soon as possible. Okay? At this time, I know that the wireless mic in the middle of the auditorium is ready to go. If individually you would like to come up and just ask your question, one of our expert panelists or one of the expert school administrators in the audience would be more than happy to assist.
Yep, absolutely. Is that brand new? Is that brand new? The iPads? They just got it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for tonight's discussion. My name is Russ Hovland. I live at 147 Countryside Drive here in Berkeley Heights, although it has a Summit mailing address. It's really Berkeley Heights. I'm here tonight basically with two questions, and I'm not sure who on the panel to address it to. But having recently attended a Board of Adjustment hearing on March 24th, as many of you may know, Edge Technologies and Wireless Communications is currently petitioning the Berkeley Heights Board of Adjustment for a variance to put up a cell tower in the field out here between the lacrosse field and the baseball diamond. And I was attending tonight because I was hoping I would hear more about that variance petition as it relates to the security and safety of the students here at Governor Livingston. Because based on the testimony that was given on March 24th, it's being petitioned with the Board of Adjustment for Berkeley Heights as being a security and safety issue, and therefore I attended tonight to hear more about that, but I didn't hear any even mention of that. So that was my first question.
John, do you want to answer that, or Ernie? I know.
Ernie, you spoke. You want to touch on it?
Yeah, well, for those of you that weren't in attendance, I spoke on behalf of the chief at that meeting regarding the offer by the wireless provider to add a radio repeater to that tower. We spoke a little bit about how traditionally that part of town has been a difficult, spotty radio, police radio, not cellular. There's the two pieces of the tower. They had offered to put a police radio repeater on that tower. And I was speaking on behalf of the chief and his support for that regarding the benefits we'll get for our police radios, which sometimes in that area, in the car or inside a building in that area, don't have enough push, for lack of a better term, and the reception makes us move certain areas to speak with headquarters. And that includes, going down the hill towards Route 78. So we were speaking on that at the meeting from the police department's perspective, the benefits of no-cost installation of a repeater that we hadn't budgeted for. And the cellular benefits of that, I see also because cellular signal being so spotty up here. We had spoken about in an emergency. Anyone who's been up here on a cell phone knows you have to move yourself about to get through on cell phones in certain areas too. So in an emergency, for the value of cellular communications, we would think there'd be a benefit to anyone in this area or in this school in terms of relaying information in emergency to us. I know I didn't have information on the cost at the time. It was the one thing I didn't know about. Maybe the chief is familiar more with that than me, but I was just expressing our department's support for that tower based on the fact that a repeater was going to be included in that installation by the vendor.
So to clarify that and to sort of piggyback on what Sergeant Smith said, the police radio aspect of it is clearly a benefit because, like he said, there are some issues in and around this area. It will also go well beyond the area because the reality is in our business, there's a real possibility that our officers could end up well down Route 78 East or down that way, and any kind of enhancement in this area of the radio signal will help our officers for safety and obviously public safety. They'll be better equipped to communicate and do their job. But also the cell service is absolutely a big part of it because we utilize cell service also in our response. Our in-cars, our computers are cell-based. So all of this increased service up here will help us to respond and interact with ourselves and communicate between officers and the police department and headquarters, I should say. And obviously, like Sergeant Smith said, the individuals that are up here that live in this area or that visit this area will get the benefit of having a cell signal that is effective and that works and allows them to make contact with us. There's also, cell service now. These cell phones, they have GPS, and sometimes if we get a 911, we can also get a location. So without any communication, we can find out we know where 911 calls are coming from. So without the cell service working, that's not a feature that we can utilize. And so we are, when I was first told about this, I was looking forward to it because I know it's going to help us accomplish what we need to do in terms of public safety.
Thank you. I had a second question, probably to Chief Pasquale as well. Really ties into your discussion on drop-off and pickup times. I know I've personally addressed this with the Department of Public Works in Berkeley Heights, and I believe Bob Bacino, I think, who's the town engineer.
Yes.
And it really has to do with the traffic flow, usually at the end of the school day on Hunterdon Boulevard, trying to pull out onto Glenside. That's a very dangerous intersection, especially in conjunction with the people coming up Glenside that may not be aware that there's actually a side street at the top of the hill. There are a few stops, there are a few signs out there. One is a 35-mile-an-hour sign. A second one is a merge sign for the right-hand lane merging with the left-hand lane. And I think the third sign is two people walking or two pedestrians crossing. In terms of drop-off times, pickup times, and general student safety here at Governor Livingston and I followed up with Bob today, there was really no follow-up at this point in time that he could offer. I was just wondering if, in conjunction of what you've looked at in terms of student safety here at Governor Livingston, whether that issue has also been looked at.
I can't say specifically if it has right there. I know it's something I know the intersection, and I make that left turn or right turn, and I understand your concerns. If a lot of times, if everyone's doing the right thing and following the laws strictly, the speed limits and obeying stop signs, there should be no problems, but that's not necessarily the case. But we will look into that. You're welcome.
I would only add that Mr. Cantagallo alluded to the fact that tomorrow the business administrator and Mr. Cantagallo are meeting with the safety officer from the township, and actually we're looking at a Safe Schools grant, and that might be something that falls under that purview, so we will definitely include that in that discussion. So thank you for that.
First, I wanted to say, let me step back. First, I wanted to say thank you very much to all of our law enforcement personnel, especially for your service to our community. I feel like there's such a concentration of people in this room who, on a daily basis, do so much for my family and my kids and everything. It's kind of like the State of the Union. I wonder if someone else sequestered up in some office somewhere. I had just had a couple of questions that were more about just, I thought you laid everything out very well from a procedural standpoint, and I'm wondering how things are actually happening kind of on the ground with a few of these things. So I'll just run through, they're really quick, but early on you explained that the practices and responses are based on, and there's a whole list of sources for developing your plans to deal with things. So there's the security drill law, there's the various ones, the security task force from the School Boards Association. Because they're all coming from different places, Homeland Security, is there ever any conflict in the practices that are recommended? And so does the town, the district, and the police department working together have to kind of figure out what their specific approaches will be, and is that all kind of worked out ahead of time? Bureaucratically, you get advice from this group, you get advice from this group, and they all touch on different things, and they don't always dovetail together perfectly. So how do you deal with that, if that is the case?
Actually, there's a state level that deals with Homeland Security. There's representatives from superintendents associations, principals associations, law enforcement. And, you know, at a very high level, any of the recommendations that they send, they try to vet out on that level. And then that information comes through the Department of Education with respect to guidance. There are some nuances that are specific to our school district and to our schools that we sometimes will have to sit down and talk about and clarify before it becomes, you know, a part of our crisis response manual. The other thing I think that's important to note in that respect is we also have the superintendents and the chiefs of police also realize, particularly when, I guess, Facebook started to become, or social media was more prevalent. So the superintendents and chiefs of police from the surrounding communities, meaning Summit, Chatham, New Providence, Berkeley Heights, we get together on a regular basis, and we also, because we know that if there's something that's going to occur, we're going to have to rely on possibly another school district or another police force in order to assist us and vice versa. So those are some of the ways that we look at things so that we're sure that they're things that work within our philosophy and what we think will increase and provide them the safest environment.
I'm assuming, though, that there's always, as much as you plan everything out, every situation is going to be different, and that's where the judgment comes into play. And I think as parents, just speaking very generally, I think that's where panic arises with parents, because we know that that's the case, and that we have to rely on the people in charge to make those quick decisions and be on the same page with each other and all of that. And I think that maybe sometimes that's why when something does happen, people are so anxious for information and they want to know, just because you just don't know how everything is going to play out. And even with all these plans and everything, you can't make assurances that you know, well, if A then B, if C then D, you can't. So that just knowing that you're putting so much effort into planning for things so you can be the best prepared you can is very reassuring to me. I'm going to move on to, oh, go ahead if you have something.
No, the only thing I would say, Trudy, is that I think the most important thing for parents to understand is that when we're in a crisis mode, in a crisis situation, our focus is on making sure that what's going on here is first, and we're trying to get information out as soon as possible,
Right.
but our priority always has to be on
Absolutely, right.
dealing with
Right.
whatever the crisis is.
Yeah.
And I understand that's very difficult, you know, they're your children, and
Right.
you're worried about their safety, so
Right.
we really try to make sure that we're trying to provide as much information, but at the same time really focused on making sure everything is working the way that it should.
Exactly, and which is what we would want you to be doing too, so. Okay, on another question I had was, for the student resource officers, a lot of the topics that you mentioned when you said you would go into the classroom and you would talk about curbing your emotions and not getting out of hand, and some of the other things that you kind of alluded to, do you coordinate or collaborate with the school counselors, you know, who are on staff in the building here, or the ones who work through the central office, the related departments that help students with things? Because it seems like there would be an overlap, and how often do you get together to get on the same page again on advice and such that you're giving to students?
Right now, in Berkeley Heights, we're only teaching the 5th grade.
Okay.
So more of the counselors, I believe, get involved in the middle school and the high school. And when we do, we plan on going out to other grades, and then obviously we'll reach out more to them at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple schools, Woodruff especially, their school nurse has reached out to me, and she's given me some advice on different topics, and all the principals have to, like how to cover different areas. But again, we're starting in the 5th grade, and at that point, I don't believe they have too much dealing with the guidance counselors at that point in their education. Is that correct? No? Okay.
There are elementary guidance counselors
Okay.
available to the students also, so that the information that's presented is also shared via the principals, and the principals will talk with the counselors and the teachers talk with the counselors. So those counselors are available at the preschool, the elementary level, They're more specific at the middle school because they follow a grade, and then at the high school, they're assigned to a particular person.
Just to clarify, the LEAD program is it's a pretty detailed, laid-out program, curriculum that's being followed.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily that Ed is, or Officer Gaffney is dealing one-on-one, a school resource officer will be available, but if there was something, a specific issue with it, it would be something we would push on to the professionals, and Ed would push on to the professionals, and that'd be the school counselors.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
starting,
That
so.
actually gets right at what I was
Okay.
wondering. Okay. And then the last one was, and here's where we get into the sensitive stuff, but I don't have it, it's not a specific issue at all, but I'm wondering, can you comment on how much, if there's any kind of increase, or what is the prevalence of, and are you seeing any increase in the more, I don't even know how to describe it, with the sexting and the cyber this and the, are you seeing any kind of increase in reckless behaviors in that regard in our student population? Is this something that continues to take hold, or has Berkeley Heights managed to escape the worst of that, which I know is out there and is very prevalent in other communities? And I'm wondering, just to get a read on where our school community, but the kid, where are they? Where are they on the spectrum of this issue? And just to be realistic and to be knowledgeable.
I think.
Would you like to take that, Mrs. Radner?
Every year, actually, when we meet with the prosecutor's office, they give us statistics of Union County, what's going on in Union County. And as much as we would like to think that we're not a microcosm of Union County, we really are. So that many of the things that are occurring in Union County are occurring in Mountainside and Berkeley Heights. We always will try to be not reactive, but proactive, and as soon as we find out about information, we try to make sure that the kids understand if they were to do something like that, how it could be affect their digital footprint or their reputation in general. But we learn from other districts, and I think other districts have learned from us based upon different circumstances that have occurred. So I can't get into specifics, and I think we've been very fortunate. There have been situations we've dealt with. We've been able to come to a fairly quick resolution when it is something, and in many cases, it's not something that has a permanent impact, is the best way for me to say that. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
Yeah, Mrs. Ratner, if I could. Also, Officer Gaffney and I get out ahead on that issue. We include that in the curriculum in the LEADS classes. And actually, one of the new amendments to the Memorandum of Agreement, and Detective Veltri, you can probably speak on this as well, is that they made cyber harassment now a 4th-degree crime. It's an indictable offense. And we really preach that to the kids to teach the severity of that. In conversing with detectives in other departments, I hear some real horror stories. And thankfully, I don't think that really it's that prevalent in our community.
So what kind of a meeting would it be if you didn't ask a question?
Hi, I have a quick question. You mentioned how important it was for parents to try and stay ahead of technology because of all these new things that are coming out that our kids are always experimenting on. So how, as a parent, are we able to sort of stay ahead of that? Because these things are coming on so quickly, and I can never seem to keep ahead of the game. So
Yeah.
is there any sites we can go to, anything that you can advise us on?
Absolutely, even better, or hopefully better. I've done a parent presentation here, actually in this auditorium. So if you reach out to the superintendent or the principal here, we'll get together and we'll do another one.
Okay.
And I go through about 30 slides of the newest applications, how kids are using them, how they're hiding things from you, you know, what's relevant, what's no longer relevant, the kinds of cases that I see throughout the county, and we get a little specific about certain towns and kind of cases I've seen and dealt with. So, yeah, absolutely request the parent program. You know, I'd be more than happy to come out and do that. It's about an hour long. You can coordinate it maybe with the PTA meeting or something like that, so we get a
Okay.
bigger turnout.
That would be great.
And like I said, we'll do it here, and it's very beneficial. I enjoy doing the student one, but I think more is actually learned at the parent one than anything, because the kids already know about this stuff.
They do.
They know what's new, you know what I mean? It's popular to them, but might not be as, you know, popular to you guys. So, yeah, we can definitely set something up.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have two comments. First, I want to thank you all for being so passionate about taking care of our kids. It's clear, and I appreciate that. And I also wanted to comment on, you know, my kid, my youngest is 7, and when they come home and tell me about a drill they've had, they are very matter of fact. And I ask them about it, and they know what they were supposed to do. And so I thank you for managing that balance between showing them how important it is as well, but not making them scared or panicked. So that's really well done. My question is about our buildings, which are all pretty old and way predate the horrible things that have happened, say in Connecticut. And I'm thinking about the entryways in particular. A number of them, there is not, when you get buzzed in, there's a camera, so they see you, they ask what your business is. They buzz you in, but there's not a person there for a number of them. You have to physically go around a corner, turn, and go into an office, for example. And to me, it feels like that leads a lot of opportunity for someone, instead of taking a right, taking a left. And if the office personnel are busy, which they usually are, and they're not sitting there watching that camera, there's an opportunity for something to happen. And I'm just wondering about whether those entryways have been assessed, how they might compare to if a new school is built. Are they handling the entryways differently?
Actually, we just went through, as Detective Sergeant, I'm sorry, just Sergeant Schmidt shared. He completed the assessment of all the schools, and actually, Chief DePasquale came in and sat down with me and went through some of the recommendations. Now, they shared them with each of the principals, but then we did an overview of the school district. And those are some of the things that they've identified as areas that we need to take a look at. So that is actually in our plan with respect to, actually not the next school year, but as we develop the next school year's budget, what types of safety and security measures we need to look at in terms of our capital focus, our capital improvement focus. So that is definitely on our list, and obviously we continue to look at some other things that they shared that can be done immediately that just will also provide a safer entry for and exit for students.
Thank you.
I think it's worth noting, we have the buildings that we have, and it's important to note that I know the school administration and the school staff, and certainly the police department, we take certain measures knowing that there may be a physical deficiency here and there procedurally to mitigate the risks. So, and that's kind of part of what our assessment is to do. I don't like to speak about specifics like that per se, but we understand what the issues are, and we do things that, like I said, procedurally sort of mitigate that, so.
Mr. Cantagallo, you were supposed to say that the board president isn't allowed to ask any questions.
We've run out of time, I'm sorry.
Yes. I have two questions. The first has to do with underage drinking. Underage drinking appears to be on the rise. And what's the balance, I guess legally maybe, between underage drinking that happens at a home outside of a school property? And you talked both about the memorandum of agreement. So whether it be in Berkeley Heights or Mountainside, there's some type of a police incident where underage drinking is reported. Is that then shared with the school, with the attempt, and I know we have our school resource officers here, with an attempt to obviously educate and help that child?
I can answer that, and I'm sure the police officers can add to it. Anytime there's an incident involving our students, that information is shared with the administration, the district level administration, and the administration at the school level. If it is an incident that involves underage drinking, then actually the names of those students that were involved, that the police provide to us through the memorandum of agreement, their names are given to our core team. Now, our core team is a group of professionals in each school that look at students and, determine whether or not, based upon a variety of factors, whether or not a student might be at risk. And, there are different levels that a core team may respond to it. And that is, there might be a checklist that goes around to see, are there other situations occurring that are giving us a concern that that student really is at risk, and maybe a counselor needs to speak to them, maybe the parents need to be called, maybe there needs to be some type of an assessment. Again, the whole focus of those situations are to make sure that kids are safe, and if there is a problem, to provide assistance in mitigating that problem. I don't know if any of the officers want to share.
No, I'll just say,
anything.
as far as I've been here about 11 years in Berkeley Heights, and a lot with the Mountainside too. I don't see any spike lately in any incidents with the kids at all. I think it's been pretty even. Sometimes there's up and downs, but now everyone seems to hear everything, and the kids like to talk. So yeah, I don't see any spike in underage drinking. Do you?
No, I wouldn't.
And could I ask you, underage drinking obviously legally is all illegal. So you say it hasn't spiked. Is your perception that it's high? When you say it hasn't changed, it's been about the same as it's
Absolutely,
been?
I think it's been a steady flow. And
over
I think
those years.
I think our kids are no different than the other kids in the state.
Okay.
I mean, our kids are a little bit better, obviously, but it's been, I think, straight, pretty much.
Okay.
Nothing's really changed.
The one thing I would add, Mr. Einstein, is that this is my 35th year, I'm old, which is older than some of the people who are up here. But through those 35 years, there's a possibility that, or what I see is, we might go through a cycle of alcohol being the drug of choice, and then we might go through a cycle of marijuana or cocaine, or most recently it's been heroin. So, we seem to go through cycles, and mostly the same amount of kids are involved, but they're just involved in different types of abuse.
Okay. My second question has to do with, I sometimes hear when there's an incident, my first perception always, I live in Berkeley Heights, is that the Berkeley Heights Police Department is involved. And I often hear at times that something was referred to the Union County Prosecutor's Office. Where does that line get differentiated? Is there a, I don't understand the difference of where is there some level of responsibilities, accountabilities, or jurisdiction that takes over based on the type of crime, the location of it? I'm interested to understand the difference.
There are certain crimes where the Union County Prosecutor's Office will take lead investigation on it, such as the Special Victims Unit will handle crimes involving children of a certain age point up to adulthood, up to 18 years old. So there's certain things the Union County Prosecutor's Office will investigate alongside municipalities, such as narcotics investigations, things like that. I hope that helps you differentiate that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, it appears that we don't have any more questions. I again want to thank everybody for being here, the community members, our panelists, our administrators. And as you can see from our presentation, the question and answer period, that we're continually working together as a group to make sure that all of our students, staff, and schools are the safest possible they can be. Thank you and have a fabulous night.
There's just one other thing. I just wanted to thank Mr. Voorhees and our students from our TV production classes for filming tonight's presentation so that any parents who were not able to attend tonight, we will have this so that it will be on public TV. This is, everyone well, that needs to know is here, but we will provide that opportunity for anyone who was not able to be here. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We truly appreciate it.